You're watching The Buck Stops Here, and our newsmaker tonight is the ever-provocative, always outspoken Tavleen Singh, whose new book, India's Broken Tryst, is grabbing headlines, as always, for its very, very controversial arguments. Tavleen Singh is on The Buck Stops Here. It's a pleasure, as always, to have you on the program. I remember not so long back, we were here discussing Darbar, and now India's Broken Tryst. You're clearly disappointed with the country, and the larger theme that comes across is that almost no leader of this country has actually lived up to her or his potential.
Actually, what this book is about, which is why, you know, when during the election campaign, the word parivartan, during the 2014 election campaign, the word parivartan had great resonance, and it was different things to different people. But it really was, in my view, the reason why Narendra Modi won.
Yeah.
And that people want this shabby country, which has been unable so far to give people just the basics: clean water, roads, electricity. You know, I mean, just those things don't exist. And when you look at India compared to almost any other country, we look really bad. So I actually started to think about it, and then thought that I would try to find out why. And because I've been a political journalist for 40 years, I realized this is my view. It's my personal idea that it's colonial governance and democratic feudalism, that it's a kind of lethal combination of these two things that have deprived 90% of
So describe colonial governance. What is colonial governance?
The British trained the ICS to serve the rulers. The training of our bureaucrats is to serve the ruler and not the citizen. Now, that training should have been changed, like our education system should have been changed, at independence.
So is it that the bureaucrats have too much say, or is it how they're molded? Is it too much bureaucracy, or is it the kind of bureaucracy?
It's the kind of training they're given. They're still trained not to be the servants of the people. Anna Hazare was right about that. They're trained to be the servants of the government.
So it's interesting that you should bring up the bureaucracy, because Narendra Modi is actually seen to be somebody who likes running his government with bureaucrats, even more than by ministers, by bureaucrats. Do you have a sense that he's doing that? Is this a government run by bureaucrats?
I do, and I've criticized it often. I think that he is making a mistake, that what he needs is a political team. I think one of the reasons why he hasn't been able to make more impact in the past 2 years is because he's relying on bureaucrats who have a kind of servile attitude to the dynasty, right? And
to the Gandhis.
There's only
so
one
you're saying the bureaucrats working in the Modi government, according to you, continue to be loyal to the Gandhis?
I think
Where is
so.
the evidence of that?
I think that the first budget, you saw evidence that the same people who made the budget before...
But politicians write the budget, right? Not bureaucrats.
No.
Or I would say politicians have the ultimate veto on what the bureaucrats input.
They do, but how much do they understand? It's a very complicated thing, governance.
This Prime Minister in particular is seen to be a leader who believes in bureaucrats. And you're saying that's a mistake.
I think that's a mistake. I think that he believes in them because he used bureaucrats very effectively in Gujarat. But, you know...
Running India is not running Gujarat.
Yeah.
Now, the most contentious part of this book, especially for BJP supporters, is what you say about Vajpayee. And at some point in the book, you actually say that he could have done much more if he weren't so much like a Congress Prime Minister.
Yeah.
You're actually calling Vajpayee, who described himself as an RSS man, as a Swayam Sevak, a Congress Prime Minister. Why? Because, you know, reading through those chapters, Tavleen, you seem to have a problem with just social graces and social courtesies that he or his daughter Gunu showed Sonia Gandhi and her family. Should social graces be thrown out of the window?
No. That's not really. That's just the little flavor and the thing. That's not what it was. It was that the changes in governance that I'm hoping that the whole country is hoping that Narendra Modi will be able to bring. I was hoping he would do it. I keep hoping BJP chief ministers will do it, that they will improve the school system, because the Congress Party's biggest failures have been in the social sector. Schools, hospitals, these are things that ordinary Indians have no access to.
Congress Prime Minister.
He didn't make those changes. And I quote an interview with him before he became Prime Minister, he knew what needed to change. He knew what needed to change.
So why didn't he do it?
I think that he was too old by the time he was just tired or something. I think if he'd been Prime Minister, I'm a huge fan of his. I've been a supporter.
It doesn't seem like that in this book.
Well, you know, I mean...
You almost present him who
I think he
you almost
failed.
present him as unremarkable.
I think he was
You're saying he
unremarkable.
failed?
As Prime Minister,
He failed or he was unremarkable? Which one?
Both. I think,
Vajpayee was a failure and an unremarkable Prime Minister compared to, let's say, who?
well, no, let's judge him by his own measure. I'm comparing, what I hoped for from a BJP Prime Minister was that he would be different to a Congress Prime Minister. And I don't think that he was different.
So let me put to you that when you call him an unremarkable Prime Minister, when you say he didn't actually achieve that much except for maybe the Golden Quadrilateral, his highways project, you forget the nuclear
Without
tests.
building the side roads.
You forget the nuclear tests. You forget perhaps the most imaginative Kashmir policy that I have actually seen any Prime Minister, any Indian Prime Minister applying when he spoke about Insaniyat and the template of Insaniyat. You forget the many brave risks he took with Pakistan. And you forget above all his philosophy of Raj Dharm that actually managed more than any other BJP leader to soften the hard angularities of Hindutva. Don't these count for something? Aren't these achievements?
Okay, on the nuclear tests, for a start, I've said this before, they're not something that is, very important to me, even though I agree that they got the Pakistani bomb out of the basement.
And he initiated the process of the Indo-US nuclear deal.
I thought that was Dr. Manmohan Singh. I think you have to give credit.
He sealed it, but the process began in the Vajpayee
I think the
years.
opening up to America
began in the Vajpayee years.
Yeah, but I'm actually this is a book about domestic issues more than anything else. So I haven't really dealt with foreign policy, and I actually praise him
for the Lahore speech.
For the Lahore speech. So I'm not saying that he was all bad, but I think that very important changes need to happen in India if you want democracy to deepen. If you want civil rights instead of civil privileges. We have a very privileged group of people that include you and me that can find a hospital to go to, that can, and
Sure, I don't have a disagreement with that.
I think Vajpayee could have initiated those changes in government. Why was there no new attempt to look at education?
But do you not think he did something very, very significant for the BJP, which is that through the politics of consensus, he managed to keep Hindutva outside the door?
I'm not as frightened of Hindutva as you are, and
Although you say at another point in the book that Modi's big mistake would be to not contain Hindutva.
But there's Hindutva and Hindutva. I am of the view that Indian children must be taught much more about their heritage, which unfortunately does include
which is not
the
only
Hindu
Hindutva.
Heritage. No. We have children who grow up without reading
we're all colonized.
Kalidas.
We're all colonized
We have
and
children
deracinated, and I feel bad in some ways that progressiveness was equal to westernization, because it's not. But to be culturally rooted, Tavleen, is not the same as political Hindutva.
Political Hindutva, in my view, has been blown up too much by the media. I really don't think it exists. I don't think that the Bajrang Dal or the Vishwa Hindu Parishad have the kind of power that the media...
Yet you have described the RSS as an albatross around the BJP neck. You're not a fan of the RSS.
I'm not a fan of the RSS, but I think...
You believe the Prime Minister was too silent on the Dadri issue.
Yes.
You believe beef bans are a ridiculous issue.
Yes. You
do not believe in this kind of identity
I make
politics.
a very clear distinction between the rubbish that some of the Hindutva MPs talk and between the need to re-examine what we're teaching our children about the country in which they live.
But that isn't just Hindu heritage, right? It's multicultural, multi-religious.
I know, we've been listening to this multicultural thing for so long.
Do you not agree with that?
I don't agree with the fact that the pre-Islamic heritage of India should have been diminished in the way that it has been in our schools. I do not agree with that. I think that there has been too much pressure, because Muslims have a very strong voice in this country, to insist on things like, Vande Mataram is a bad idea, that, Sare Jahan se acha, no, what am I talking about? What I'm saying is that,
Muhammad Akhlaq's son, Sartaj.
I heard him say that. That's what confused me when I was looking at your face. I was thinking of that.
Sare Jahan se acha, after his father had been lynched to death.
Yeah, no. What I'm trying to say is that, there has been too much pressure from very powerful Muslim groups to keep out anything that seems to be pre-Islamic in India's heritage. And that, I think, is wrong. I think Sanskrit should be taught, not the way it's stupidly taught. But, I have a son who resents the fact that he grew up without Indian languages.
That's fine.
No,
but I want to take you back to Vajpayee, where we started.
And I think Vajpayee could have made those changes.
And I would argue that with his Raj Dharm template, with his soft approach, with his consensus building, with his coalition building, he did create a politics of consensus that perhaps managed to not make Hindutva seem as hardline as it would seem in today's debates.
You've forgotten that they accused him then of allowing churches to be burnt in Gujarat, that he had to actually go there, and it turned out that no churches were burnt. You forget a lot of his own baggage where this is concerned. And I really don't think that where it comes to Raj Dharm, he used that term once in Gujarat. But what about Raj Dharm in giving people clean water to drink? In giving them schools, roads, hospitals? That's Raj Dharm too. Why didn't he do all that?
There is this bit in the book where you describe how you're in the middle of a conversation with his daughter, with Gunu, and you say Sonia Gandhi walks into the room and that she basically ran to greet her, and later you asked her, why did you do that? Why were you so deferential? And she said, it's just courtesy. Isn't it just courtesy, Tavleen? Because
I don't think so.
Why
didn't he pursue the Bofors case? There was a chance to end kleptocracy with that case. We had evidence of money paid by Bofors into the accounts of Rajiv and Sonia Gandhi's best friends. Quattrochi was a fertilizer salesman. Why was he being bribed by an armaments company? Why did Vajpayee not pursue that case?
So what's your answer?
My answer is
that they would argue that they did, and they sent a CBI team.
They certainly didn't. We all know that they didn't. The case they made was so ridiculous that it was thrown out of court, right?
And I was going to just say that Bofors hit a legal wall. It ended in acquittal.
Come on. There was...
But that's
even
the fact.
after, in Vajpayee's time, the head of the prosecutor in Sweden, who was dealing with the case, said, why is nobody interrogating Sonia Gandhi? Why did nobody? It wasn't a legal wall.
So answer your own question. Why did he not?
I'm giving you the answer. I believe he was very overawed.
Yeah, you seem to suggest
that he was overawed by he was certainly a big fan of Nehru, and I think he was very overawed by Sonia Gandhi.
You describe a conversation in the book where you actually are discussing Sonia Gandhi with Vajpayee, and he tells you that she actually doesn't have to do much. She just has to cover her head and do namaste and win votes. She doesn't even have to say very much.
Yeah. So maybe he was closer to the political mood at that point than I was. Had I been in his place, I actually asked him, which I also quote in the book, I said, do you have any problem with the fact that your mukhya pratidwandi is a foreign woman? And he said, no, I don't. Yeah. So
why is that not something to be appreciated?
Why is it to be appreciated? I mean,
do you believe that Sonia's foreign origin is an issue? Like
not anymore.
Not even Sushma Swaraj, who
shaved her
head once
no,
to protest it.
In the beginning, and I've said this in the book, that this white European trying to be Prime Minister of India, and she actually did become de facto Prime Minister, as we know, and nobody criticized her for it. And once she became once she was the people's choice, I stopped speaking of the foreigners, but I oppose her policies, and I have a right to.
There is another part in the book which there's a sentence that leapt out at me as extremely contentious, and you said Rajiv Gandhi introduced bimbos into politics. And
yes.
And for a feisty woman like you, I was surprised to see you using a word like that about women. Bimbo?
Yes.
Who's a bimbo?
I've mentioned a few names which
but they're not really politically substantive.
No. Women must come into politics if they have an idea of what they want to be in politics for. They mustn't come in because they look pretty and are actresses who've never had a political thought in their heads. They actually harm the cause of women being...
But men are never questioned in this way, Tavleen. There are dynasts who come into politics.
I object to them as well. But
they're not called bimbos.
No,
bimbo deeply sexist?
What's wrong with being called a bimbo? I wouldn't mind being called a bimbo.
Of course you would mind. Of course, because it suggests you don't have a mind. And of course you'd mind.
Well, a lot of the women that he did bring into politics at that point don't have a mind.
Did all the men have a mind?
Some of them didn't. But, they weren't sort of in politics only because they looked pretty.
There's another part where Mr. Advani is described as being desperate to look younger than he
That's a very specific context.
And it seemed very, very personally uncharitable.
That was a very specific context. In the 2009 election, which I believe that Dr. Manmohan Singh won, Dr. Manmohan Singh looked a lot better than Advani at that point, and there was a picture in all the newspapers of him doing weights in the gym, and I thought that that was a rather sad attempt to look young.
In the paragraph where you talk about that image, you speak of how you believe 2009 was Manmohan Singh's victory, and you're actually quite charitable about Manmohan Singh.
I think Manmohan Singh's been one of the best prime ministers in his first term as Prime Minister.
Better than Vajpayee, because you sound less disappointed in Manmohan Singh than you do in Atal Bihari Vajpayee.
I am less disappointed in Manmohan Singh. I think Manmohan Singh, had he not betrayed the cause in the second term, when he was really treated as a kind of regent who was just keeping the throne warm.
And didn't intervene in corruption cases.
No, and allowed the National Advisory Council to be above the cabinet.
Okay, let's move on to the present, the Prime Minister, of whom you believed a change would be heralded when he was elected. When you went to present him a copy of your book, you gave him a few harsh words about his media management. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think that it was not meant to be an interview, but I told him that, he was making a mistake by staying away from the media. Because...
Don't you think he has a pretty deep dislike for much of the media, not all of it?
He has a right to.
Because he traces it back to 2002.
He was demonized.
But do you believe that he was unfairly criticized for 2002?
Yes, absolutely.
For 2002?
Yes.
Because I have seen you at other points saying...
No, one minute. He should be... How many times did you criticize Rajiv Gandhi for 84?
I mean,
How many times was his name mentioned?
I was in school, but
not you personally.
I certainly think that 84 and 2002 are bookends of our conversation.
No, 1 minute.
On riots and
do you remember the Chief Minister of...
I agree. More riots have happened on the Congress watch.
The Chief Minister of UP when Merit Malyana happened? Do you remember his name? Exactly. Do you remember the name of the man who was Chief Minister of Bihar when Bhagalpur happened? All of those riots were worse than anything that happened in Gujarat. Right? And we made it sound as though after 1947, nothing as bad as Gujarat had happened. Now, it might be because there was television. It was the first televised riot. But he was demonized unfairly.
Come back to, therefore, given his dislike or his suspicion of at least the English media.
All the media. He's not seeing anyone.
Right. And why do you believe that's a mistake? Because clearly his calculation seems to be, I can bypass the mainline media and talk to people directly through Twitter.
Well, I think it's a mistake, and I told him that. Because
what did he say?
Well, he sort of nodded his head. I don't think that, he thought that I was there to give him any advice, and I wasn't. But I think that he hasn't realized that when you have 350 news channels, 24-hour news channels, it's not Gujarat he's dealing with. He's dealing with a country that is complex and a media that is very, very powerful, more powerful, almost more powerful than politicians are today. And so to ignore them completely and to pretend that the media
don't exist,
not a good idea. Let me tell you what his biggest mistake is. The Indian industry led the economic reforms. After the license Raj ended, had Indian industry not surged forward and really taken on the world with its hands tied behind its back. So investment hasn't picked up yet. Jobs haven't started. The most important thing in my view is jobs. You've got 12 million new jobs to create every year. And that can only happen when investment picks up. So that, I think, is a big mistake.
What this country spends all its time debating these days is nationalism. And, there's a very politicized discourse around nationalism. And in one interview I read of yours, you said, what is this Bharat Mata Ki Jai rubbish?
Yeah.
I'm assuming you see the debate around it as a complete non-issue.
It's a complete non-issue to me. It's a complete non-issue. I wouldn't even bother to say anything about it. I think Asaduddin Owaisi, if he wants to say, I don't know, Madre Vatan Ki Jai, etc., or Zindabad,
what is Jai Hind, and I won't say...
Who cares, right? And for Baba Ramdev to start talking this kind of Taliban way, we're going to cut their throats and all this is nonsense. This is not important. It damages the image of the government.
So do you believe the BJP is making a mistake by making these patriotism tests that have been introduced into our narrative? If you don't say this, you aren't a nationalist. If you, talk to Kanhaiya, you're a traitor. I do believe these contradictions may trip the BJP, because look at the government.
Yes, I end the book by saying that. Yes, I end the book. Kashmir, I have a different view.
Okay.
I think that with the, I've written a book about it.
I know.
I think to the Kashmiris, you've got to say, listen, baby, you're going nowhere. All right? Get used to it and tell us what we can do to make it easier for you to adjust. But there's going to be no division of India again.
No. I meant Kashmir as the contradiction of the BJP and the PDP being in alliance.
No, that's
when you ratchet up the nationalism debate.
That's a huge step forward. And it's a shame that Mehbooba's taken so long and, gone on, so that, Kashmir is already beginning to explode again, which is a big problem. But I think that the Kashmir policy of this government, if I was in anything to do with it, is to first make it clear what you can do and what you cannot do. All these years we've been saying, no, we must talk to so-and-so, we must do that. I don't think we should talk to Pakistan about Kashmir at all, ever.
But we should talk to the Kashmiris, that's
we
what I would
should talk to the Kashmiris and tell them very clearly, we can talk to you, but you are not going to break this country once more. Then the conversation begins.
Come back to the Bharat Mata Ki Jai and what you end the book with. You're saying the BJP, by focusing its energies on these issues, is actually harming itself.
Is harming the Modi government, harming Narendra Modi personally. Because the vote was not for Hindutva, it was for parivartan and vikas. And he must remember this every day if he wants to win again.
Last question before we close, Tavleen. Sonia Gandhi, a big character in Darbar, a big character in this book. Some would say
she's been our de facto prime minister for 10 years. How do I ignore her?
I'm not asking you to ignore her, but would you accept that you have almost a pathological dislike for her? It seems to be very, very evident. It seems very personal.
Personally, I admire her. Personally, I think that for a little foreign housewife to have become the most important leader in India is remarkable, but it's also a sign of the broken tryst, that a little semi-educated housewife from another country could become India's most popular leader.
But there are many uneducated politicians.
But she's not even Indian. I'm talking about the fact that she could do this. She could become India's most important leader. That's a broken tryst.
Pleasure to have you on the program.
A pleasure being here. Thank you.